Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production. Today, we are talking about something almost invisible. Are your troubles tuning your drums having to do with the hoops on your drums? A little while back, I had somebody ask me if I thought that a drum of theirs was out of round because when they looked down on the batter head, they felt like they saw gaps at the edges of the head between the edge and the hoop that was different in different parts of the drum, and they were really worried that their drum was actually out of round. And all we had to do to discover that it wasn't was to change out the hoop for one that I knew was brand new, definitely hadn't had any damage or anything. And suffice to say, the drum was fine, and the hoop that had come on it, the drum had been dropped or something like that. That was an aesthetic thing that got noticed, but the health of your hoops is actually a much bigger deal than you might think, especially if you have a particular drum that's giving you a lot of grief, or if you have a drum that used to be great and is now starting to act really strangely. Thanks again to our supporters over at Patreon for making this possible. This is an entirely Patreon-supported episode. We're here doing this because of them, and we could not be more grateful. If you haven't been over there, please follow the link below, check it out, and see if you can jump on in and help. All right, so let's dive right in. First of all, the type of hoop that you're using doesn't matter. They can all exhibit problems. We're going to talk about die-cast and triple flange because they're the most common that you run into. And we're also going to talk about snares and toms because the problems you have can be different depending on the range that you're trying to tune the drum in. Let's start with the snare drum. Now, this drum here, this Pearl, has a die-cast hoop on it normally. That's what it normally has every time that we use it. And I brought one from home that I know has problems with being basically not level, and also a couple of spots in it where the spots where the screw actually goes through the head is a little bit bent in a funny way. Now, you might wonder, what is the problem with this if you're thinking about that if you tension everything evenly, the head should be even. If the hoop is not level, as in to say, not just the edge being level around, but also where it contacts the hoop underneath, if that's not level, then at a given tension, you're not going to be distributing tension evenly among every single spot along that hoop. You're basically going to run into areas of difficulty where the tensioning you're doing and how hard it feels like you're tightening the screws isn't going to equate to the pitch difference that you're experiencing. So let's go into this now. I've put the bad hoop on here, and I want to show you two spots on the head that are showing different pitches. Let's listen to that real quick. Now, immediately, you'd think that the one that sounds higher has more tension, but in fact, the one that sounds higher is only finger tight, and the one next to it that's exhibiting a lower tension is actually cranked very tight. This is an easy way to tell that maybe there's something funny going on with your hoops. A lot of people immediately assume that it's something to do with the bearing edge or the drum being out of round, but based on the way that we use drums, it's much more likely that the hoop has sustained some kind of damage from maybe the drum got tipped over once or the case got set down hard. Especially with a thinner hoop, this can happen very easily. Now, this can lead to the drum behaving in some funny ways. I'm going to play it a little bit where I have it tuned, and again, I'm not doing this on purpose. We've tuned this drum up a lot here. This is purely an effect of me trying to get all of the screws to be the same pitch on the hoop and discovering that some of the screws aren't even really all the way in the drum. The net result of this, beyond just the overtones being kind of wild and not agreeing with the tension that's been applied to the head where they are, is that the overall behavior of the drum is a little choked, the sustain is not so great, it doesn't feel so good in the middle, the rim shot feels kind of like clunky when you hit it. It doesn't have that nice kind of oomph coming back out of it. And that's essentially because we don't have an evenly tensioned batter head. I mean, it's the same as if we just took one of the screws out of a properly tuned head with a properly all right hoop. So now let's jump over to everything being the same except we're putting on a hoop that we know is good. I'm going to tune it into a similar range and show you what that does. So it sounds different. Granted, it's not like to the to the kilohertz, same pitch, because we're tuning up drums to make them sound good. I made it sound as good as I could in the range that I was trying to get to with the other one, and immediately it feels better to hit, it sounds better, it's more lively, the snare wires sound good, getting a little less shenanigans in there. But more importantly, in that spot, now the lugs are agreeing with each other. Now, for me, being a person that tunes drums a lot, it's not hard for me to make a drum sound bad, and it's not generally hard for me to make one sound good, provided that everything is structurally intact and functioning as it should. But a hoop that actually has some kind of out of roundness or some kind of dips in it or bends, there's really not a whole lot you can do about that other than try to bend it back and hope for the best. We're going to touch on a couple of ways to figure out if your hoop is screwed up, and also some ways to do sort of like a quick triage remedy for it over at the end of the video. Now, moving to a floor tom, which is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, pitch-wise, tension-wise, what we're doing with it. It's a whole different world, but the issues are still there. Now, if you have what some of us in the community call sort of a tacoed hoop, or a gently tacoed hoop, which is to say that it's bent across like this, or maybe you're seeing it this way, more like a taco. When you put that onto a flat bearing edge and a manufactured flat head, of course, if you tune all those lugs to the same amount of tension, you're going to have more pressure at the spots in the hoop that are pressing down harder. I did that to the hoop on this drum on purpose. It was an old hoop that we had laying around that was already a little shaky, so that you can hear what we're talking about. Now, I'm going by trying to get, again, the whole thing to be one pitch, and I'm also trying to have some tension on all the screws, because if we have them loose, we're going to hear them rattling. So this is the best I could do with this hoop. You can hopefully see and also hear that there's kind of like a cross section across the head where things are lower, and then a 90-degree cross section where things are higher. That perfectly illustrates where the pressure is coming from the hoop, in addition to the pressure that we're putting on the hoop with the tuning screws. Much like the snare drum, this results in problems with sustain, with even pitch, with projection, because we're not getting complete pressure onto the edge of the drum. This is both going to show up in the length of the note and also the overall quality of the note, how good it is, how much bloom it has, and how pleasant it is to the ear. Now, just like the last one, I'm going to move it out to the hoop that we know is good, do the same rigmarole, tune it up, and see how that sounds. This sounds like I'm expecting this drum to sound. The sustain is larger, the dynamics are better, everything just feels better as I play it. And if we do the same kind of tap test around the edge, you'll see that within a pretty narrow margin, and again, when we're tuning super low, there's some wiggle room there for sure. This head is in tune with itself all the way around. So what we're looking at here is basically that in order for the drum to function at its best, the hoop has to be functioning at its best too. And the great thing about hoops, maybe die cast aside, they're a little bit pricey, but triple flange hoops, very inexpensive. In some cases, cheaper than a new batter head for the drum. But no matter the batter head you choose, if the hoop is acting up, it's not going to do what you're hoping it to do under any circumstances. So, it's really worth thinking about these things. If you're coming along with us on the larger ride of this channel of trying to learn how to tune and train our ears and get really good at understanding where we're trying to get to, and then using our ears and our hands and stuff to get there, things like this can be this weird kind of invisible barrier where it's driving you crazy and you're like, man, I'm working on this, I'm trying to get better, I don't understand why it's not working, I've done everything that they said to do. But I can tell you for sure that I have definitely, I know now, sold entire drums in the past that were totally fine because I thought that the drum had something wrong with it or there was something wrong with me. And based on what I know now, I think most of the time it was as simple as this. Now, there's a few different ways to check and see, like looking at your hoop just on its own, if it's level. Things like this don't need to be down to the thousandth of an inch, but if you take, the hoop off of, say, like the batter hoop off of your snare drum and go to a table that's pretty flat or maybe like a countertop in your kitchen and lay it on there and just see if there's any wiggle in it or if it has high spots. Some drums I have, the hoops will have a little bit of wiggle, but it tunes up fine. So this is more of a situation where you're having a problem. You can check the hoop before you get into the idea of having somebody actually work on your instrument. Which leads me to what I do now. And it's a fairly inexpensive fix. And I pretty much only do this with snare drums because toms are a little bit easier to get to work okay if there's something funny going on there. But I bought a batter hoop, basically a triple flange batter hoop in the sizes of snare drum I have, which they're all 14s, but 8 lug and 10 lug counterparts, just one batter hoop. And I keep those off the drums and they just live in my closet and they're marked. I wrote on them with a Sharpie, good hoop. What that's for is if a drum is being weird and giving me a hard time, I can pull that hoop out, swap out the one on the drum, put it on, and know whether or not it was the hoop. Simple as that. The triple flange hoops I buy are definitely under $20. Depending on the size you're getting, they might be $10 or $15. But the idea here is to just have a metric that you know is good, that hasn't been to a gig, hasn't been smashed under a lot of sticks. And sometimes it turns out that it was a faulty head. Sometimes it turns out that the drum actually has an issue. Could be a lot of things. But at least you'll know for a relatively tiny amount of money that at least the hoop is a variable you won't have to sweat. Now, say you've done that and you go, oh no, the hoop is definitely acting up. There's something wrong here. I want to get out in front of this and say that if you start messing with your hoops, you can damage them. They're actually a little more fragile than you might think, especially triple flanged ones. I have done some bending over my knee things in an emergency, flat-wise. I've seen sometimes that they're sort of egg-shaped and tried to push them back on the floor. I'm not going to recommend you do this, but it's something that you can do if you want to see if you can get it back into the realm of functioning the way that you want. It can be as simple as taking a ruler to see, if it's 14 inches in all directions, things like that. Die cast is a little harder. They're much stiffer. Bear in mind that snare side hoops are generally always going to have a little bit of a funny bend to them around the snare bed because if we're tuning to contour to the bottom of the drum, we're not tuning those flat anyway, so don't get super freaked out about those. That's just kind of part of the deal. But with, bottom and top of your tom and definitely batters on the snare, we want them to be level. And if you want to go down that road, you can experiment a little bit with trying to get it back to a level place and check it on a countertop or something like that. And when it comes to triple flange, again, replacement cost pretty low, worth making sure that they're behaving. So the long and short of it is that batter hoops in general, relatively small investment, extraordinarily big impact on the sound of the drum. If you've ever seen us compare different kinds of hoops, or if you've ever seen any of the drums here on screen with different hoops on them, it makes an enormous amount of difference. I can't stress it enough. And experimenting with hoops is one thing, that's super fun, but making sure that what's on the drum, and I've bought drums from a store brand new in a box where there was funny business with the hoops, you never know. They are going to define a much larger component of the sound of the drum than you might think. And it's really important to check them out and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. That about does it for today. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know about our new videos. We have more content coming out than ever on all of the different little micro channels we have, from here over to the Patreon, all the stuff on there. Instagram, we're trying to do everything that we can to keep this going. Thanks so much to the patrons and the Patreon for keeping us going right now. There's going to be tons of extra content from this video and every video over there. Follow the link below if you haven't. Contribute if you can. Enjoy what's over there. And lastly, Hoop stories. Tell me your hoop stories. I have a lot of them. They mostly revolve around me hating a drum I have and then discovering that it was a $12 hoop that was making me hate the drum that I have. And by all means, also, if this leads you to discover that this was your problem, let us know. And also, it's just good to know where the problem's coming from.